Oh, good morning, tables and chairs. It's May 28th, 2021. And yesterday we talked about maybe looking into some multi-pitch climbing, techniques, thoughts, ideas, and have a look at what's online for that kind of information. Multi-pitch climbing, YouTube. So, without further ado, feel free to ask any questions. Try to keep it clean, be friendly out there, and let's just talk basically about multi-pitch. If you want to talk about anchors and things like that, we could probably do a show just on anchors, because there's some kind of cool stuff coming out, like some stuff that isn't really used around here in Canada, but some American guides wrote quite a detailed book on advanced techniques that I'd like to actually get into. And so if I might use that as a template to do a few more training videos, because basically everybody's learned the basic stuff. But everybody has questions about rescue scenarios and things like that. And those are the kind of things that hopefully you never need, but you never know, you might. So why don't we go to the second display, just to have a look at what's out there. So I punched in multi-pitch climbing, right? And as you can expect, there are tons of stuff on information on multi-pitch climbing. These guys at Glenmore Lodge are generally pretty good about ice climbing and stuff like that. Manage your belay stance during multi-pitch climbing, helping you to. But these Brits have got their own way of doing things sometimes. Let's see. So, where do we start? Okay, I'll give a few people to get online here. I saw these two guys and like how to swap leads and climb through. So that means, like say you and your partner are climbing. The guy goes up, builds an anchor, and then you come up and now it's your turn to lead. How are you going to swap that over? I'm not really too concerned. These guys have one way of doing it, which isn't that bad, which is like taking all your gear and placing it on the rope that's in front of you, and that way your second, soon to be your leader, can just take the gear off and rack it any way that he feels like onto his harness, so that, because everybody has a different way of doing it, right? Yeah, there's as many ways to rack and clip your gear onto your harness. Quite often what I end up doing too, is I have a gear sling, and I may not have a ton of things on those gear slings, but I'll keep stuff that I might be using because the harness can get way overloaded with gear. So if you're taking, you're doing a long route and it's a trad climb. I hate that word trad, but I don't know. It's so into the climbing culture now that you're going to have to use it. So, you got dozens of cams or a dozen cams and a bunch of wires and then slings and things like that. A harness can get pretty crowded. If you don't know where your stuff is, you can get pretty lost. And that really sucks if you need a piece of gear really badly. You start to get a little pumped out or getting a little nervous or scared. And then you start digging around and you can't remember where you put anything. So first thing I think you'd have to do is just make sure you have a system when you're multi-pitch climbing. Well, there's other things you have to do first, but I think that's one of the most common mistakes is just not, when you're starting out, is just not knowing where everything is or having a specific system so that, I don't care how you put it, whether big cams, the low cams, the small cams, the big cams, or middle-sized cams in the front of your harness or back of your harness, doesn't matter. I tend to take the big pieces that are really kind of in the way of my harness, and I clip them to the very back of my harness. I know where they are. So if I need them, there's like that 1 or 2, the number 4 and then number 3. And then they're all the way out of the way of the stuff on the side of my harness. Quick draws tend to keep more to the front. I do anyhow. And I keep a few quick draws to the very front on either side, because you never know, especially with rock climbing, you never know if you're going to have your left hand free or you're going to have your right hand free. You don't know, because rock climbing isn't like ice climbing where you bang, bang. 99.9% of the time I place the ice screw in with my right hand because that's my dominant hand. And I lift my ice screw, or I put my ice axe up nice and high, so I'm kind of sustained and pulling down on that, and I'm nice and stable. And so I tend to do that the same way every time. Rock climbing doesn't quite work that way. You may end up having to take, holding on to, this is your dominant hold, you have to reach across, put it in your teeth or whatever it is, so that you can get a good hold or a good stable stance to put your cam in and then put your rope and drape your rope into it. But that's all neither here nor there. The anchors on a stance, I'm starting to notice these things vary greatly from nation to nation, per se, I guess, and place to place. And I suppose also it's the kind of climbing that you're doing. For all of you guys who are just kind of starting out with multi-pitch climbing, I would highly recommend that you just go to a multi-pitch sport route, so you can just work out the rope stuff first, and like rope management, building an anchor, bringing your partner up, doing the changeover, all that sort of stuff. If you can do 3 or 4 multi-pitch climbs, at least 3 or 4 that are bolted, so having bolted protection and bolted anchors, that'll put you at a great or give you a great advantage when it comes to the time when you're going to start leading trad routes, or you're going to be putting up new routes yourself, or going into the alpine and more unexplored territory than you're normally used to hanging around in. And then you can be more prepared, like if you spend less time thinking about the basics of the things, the stuff that you should already know, that leaves you more time to think about the more complicated things that are going on, like building anchors or setting, choosing your belay, where you're going to put your belay, taking care of your partner, taking care of your lead, those sort of things. So I would suggest, once again, just to reiterate, is doing, if you can, 3 or 4, but as many as 5 or 6 multi-pitch sport climbs, meaning that you have bolted protection and you have bolted anchors, and then you can just work out the redundant, because all that stuff gets relatively redundant when on a sport climb. But your stations will be different, your rope management will be different each time. You're going to have screw ups. You're going to try and do what I'm learning shit here too, like this pancake thing, where you put it all your rope in a pile, and then you're going to actually re-lead it instead of the leader or your second going up, so that the rope is stacked in the right configuration. So there's 2 parts to a rope in a climbing team, you guys. There's the bottom end and there's the lead end. The bottom end is at the bottom of the pile, and that's generally where the second is tied into. Not generally, it's almost always. And then there's the top end, which is where the leader, it's on the top of the pile of rope. And it looks like a big rat's nest, but it's what we call a stack of rope. And you tie into the top end, that leader is going to lead off from the top end, and the rope will just come out nice and evenly through the rope stuff. Now, the other thing too is anchors, right? Now, in multi-pitch, let's take a look at these guys here. This is British Mountaineering Club, which I Association with Mountaineering Instructors, Association of Mountaineering Instructors. Well, I got a bit of a new code, but let's get to some of this other stuff.
Okay.
So this is a multi-pitch instructor bringing up.
A lot of people sort of think multi-pitch climbing is very...
Let's get this
very
going.
complex, and that the belays are totally different. But
Now, this is the anchor configuration that you don't see in Canada at all, and you don't see it in. I haven't seen any examples of it in the United States. But this guy has two ropes, so he's belaying up with a double rope, and each individual rope is tied into a piece of gear, and then comes back and he clips back into the rope. So he's basically creating a loop through this rope and a loop through this rope, and he's tying it back into his harness.
But actually, the belay for a single pitch climb is very much the same as a belay for a multi-pitch climb. And so if you can go
now, you notice,
and this belay would work on a...
how he's belaying, right? So commonly, I would say 9 out of 10, but it's more than that. It's like 95.6801% of the time, I belay directly off the anchor. Okay, so we'll get an example of that later. But this guy is belaying off of his harness. So if his second falls, he becomes incorporated as part of the system. Like, he's not separated from the anchor, and he's not separated from the weight that's hanging. He's hanging with the weight, and it has the potential to be pulled off stance, or he's also going to have a little bit of a problem if his partner is injured, because this is going to delay the amount of time that he can separate himself from the system so that he can either rappel down or check out what's going on. So Frank the Tank from Australia. Now remember, Australia is on the other side of the world, so everything's upside down there. And escaping this system, like, this guy is pretty much fucked, right? Like, he's going to be pulled, he's going to have like 180 pounds on average, is what the average man weighs, all geared up, maybe a little more, pulling on him constantly. So he's going to have to somehow separate himself from that pull. Stop it. Who's doing that? My phone's doing that. Shut up, phone. I'll unplug you. So he's going to have to get himself off of that system where, because he's belaying directly off of his harness right now, and somehow transfer it to this anchor, which this anchor, he is all part incorporated with. So you can't get separated from the thing. So you're looking at a bit of a problem here. Their actual system of changing over, I'm not really that interested in. I'm just kind of interested what kind of, like, this sort of mentality of incorporating the rope. I've only seen this a few times in the wild here in Canada. We generally, as a rule, teach people to build an anchor that's independent of your harness and stuff like that. And like I say, I almost always belay off of the anchor when I'm bringing somebody up, so that if I have an issue, then I can quickly, just tie them off, change it over to a lower, build a 3-to-1 or 5-to-1 system to do a raise if that's what I have to do. Be warned, though, that lower is probably a hell of a lot easier. Raising somebody with the amount of friction, and if you're not carrying pulleys, which most people don't, the actual, in a 3-to-1 pulley system through carabiners, and depending on what you're using for a locking device, is you only get a gain of about 1.3. So you're essentially going to be hauling the entire freaking weight of that individual straight up. And I don't know about you, but I can't lift 180 pounds straight up in the air every time. So I'd need more of an advantage of that. Does it make it worthwhile carrying a pulley? Depends on the route, I think. If you're going to have something where there's really going to be a problem, or you anticipate a real problem where you have to either bring somebody up to a ledge for a rescue or get down, lower somebody down for rescue, I don't know, like, how often do you carry those things and how often do you actually use them? questions. So this sort of system.
Good, that, isn't it?
Yeah, excellent.
So, if I want to make Steve safe on this ledge really quickly, the easiest way to do is get a big armful of loop and tie a knot there. You can't, you can just about step up.
Yeah, we just don't do that in my hood because essentially we don't do this either, right?
The same belay point, and it's
So normally what we would do, well, you know what? We kind of looked at this. That's not skinny double ropes. I use Frank the Tank is asking what kind of belay device do I use for skinny double ropes. I use this particular type of the belay device, but they also make them for smaller diameter ropes. These will work, but they don't provide a whole lot of friction. Well, they provide enough friction. I've used them lots of times. But the smaller devices that are just barely enough for a 9.1 or something like that tend to work a little bit better. And most ropes don't get bigger than 9.5 these days, and they'll still work with those kinds of ropes with a slightly more friction. So this is kind of an example of something I don't particularly use myself. But obviously here in Britain, with the British Mountaineering Club, they do use this. They do use this. Probably the best example of handling or building a multi-pitch belay and then bringing somebody up is I found online, and I might be a little bit biased on this because this guy's Canadian. I don't know who he is. Obviously, he lives out in Squamish. This is the Smoke Bluffs in Squamish, BC, which is, I don't even think argumentally. It's just the best rock climbing in Canada, period, there. So let's go to the beginning of this and just have a look at Altus Mountain Guide. Let's learn more. As he says, show more. Oh, and they give us a link. Think Inflict. I haven't checked out all their stuff, but if their other videos are half as good as this one, then I think they're worth a look. So here we go, Altus Mountain Guides. I'll stop it once in a while to point out things that I think might need to be clarified.
So I've climbed my pitch. I've got to the top of the pitch where I'm going to make a belay. I've got a good belay stance, something I'm comfortable with. I've got a good crack that I can work with, that the anchor is going to be nice and high. And so step one is going to build my gear anchor. Now, if I was uncomfortable standing here, I might consider flipping myself into that first piece of gear just with a quick draw. Clip that rope in as per normal because you're still on belay. There, I'm secured. Put my remaining cams in so I have my 3-piece anchor. Equalize the whole anchor as per normal. Got my anchor built. Now I'm going to secure myself directly to the anchor so my partner can take me off the belay. So I'm going to take a locking carabiner, and I always like to clip down away from me. So I'm going to clip into the focal point, flip the bead.
Okay, so this is far more common here in Canada, and I think in North America in general, is creating this anchor and then having a main focal point, right? So that if you're bringing up 1 or 2 people or more, who knows, but you have a focal point that's easy recognizable, and then it distributes the force over the series of cams. You can see here he's tying a knot into the sling that he's going to be using, and he's using a double length sling, which is I think 120 millimeters or something like that. 120 centimeters. But anyhow, if you see at this point, that knot became incorporated. So there's his top cam, and then that knot is incorporated, and it's not perfectly equalized, but there's actually slightly more weight
Now I'm going to secure myself
on this cam here, and then this one acts as a secondary cam. There's good distribution force here, and you notice the low vector angle in here. So if this was, let's get a bigger, since we're going to be instructing here today. And you guys got to forgive me, I don't do much instruction anymore, so I may be a little bit rusty on some of this stuff. Well, not rusty on the actual techniques, but how to explain it. Yeah, so you got good distribution force, low vector angle in here, so you're getting a maximization of that force distribution. What I like about this, because if it does get super loaded for whatever reason, somebody takes a whipper, takes a fall directly off the anchor, or there's a bit of slack and the person who's coming up gets loaded, then these two take the load, and this knot will tighten up and then eventually tighten up onto the backup cam. I'm just going to call this a backup cam for now. Other thing I like what he's done here as opposed to some of the other guys I've seen, we'll look at Chris Lawrence's stuff here in a minute, is that he's clipped his quick draw in separately from this individual piece in here. So yeah, we have good distribution. Because it's granite, the cams can be this close. And a lot of times in the limestone, we have to place our pieces of protection further apart into different cracks or rocks of different nature, because the limestone and sandstone can quite often be much more fractured, whereas quartzite and granite, which is an igneous rock, I believe, can be is solid enough that it, the kind of forces that you'd have to put on this, I can't see the cams themselves, but I'm assuming they're in there properly. You can't produce the forces to make that anchor blow. So I'll just shut up now and we'll carry on. This guy does a great job. And what I like about this guy is he's really concise, to the point, and he's obviously rehearsed this, because there's no humming and hawing like in a lot of videos out there.
Directly to the anchor so my partner can take me off of the belay. So I'm going to take a locking carabiner, and I always like to clip down away from me. So I'm going to clip into the focal point, flip the beater, and that way I have the gate facing me, and it's something really nice and easy to work with. So I've got my beater set up. I'm going to unclip my rope from the quick draw, tie my clove hitch knot, clip in, get the right distance, lock that carabiner.
Okay, this clove hitch, if you don't know it, learn it, all right? If you can't learn to do a clove hitch, quit climbing, take up rafting or something, or paddling, or some other stupid sport, but you're gonna need to know a clove hitch in your lifetime. And like I say, if you can't do a clove hitch, then you can't do a munter hitch, and you can't do a munter hitch, you got no reason to be in this business.
I always like to physically make sure that I've done everything correct. Once I'm happy, I can yell down to my partner that I'm secure and he can take me off the belay. Next step is I need to pull up the slack in the system so the rope is tight on my partner and I can put him on belay and start belaying him. So you have two options. Either you do lap coils over the top rope that's connecting you to the anchor, or you can stack it on the ledge at your feet. If you're using lap coils, the key is to make every coil the same length. A trick I like to use if you're pulling up a lot of rope and you have rope drag is I'll actually redirect the rope through a quick draw on the anchor, and that way I'm pulling down using my bigger muscles instead of pulling up.
That's a good point. That works well.
If you have a nice ledge, you can stack the rope at your feet. This is the preferable method. It's a lot easier.
All too often, you guys, and I especially see this in ice climbing, is that people just stack the rope because somebody had taught them to do it that way, and they never do it any differently. He's exactly right. If you have a ledge that you can work with to stack the rope onto the ledge, it makes this entire system so much cleaner and so much easier to deal with. And the thing too is, like I say, go do multi-pitch climbs so you don't have to frickin' deal. Like, you're gonna have problems with rope management and things like that. Just Go on some multi-pitch climbs that are bolted and where you have ledge systems, or maybe even semi-hanging belay where you do have to stack the rope. Because if you're going to screw up, that's a good place to do it. And learn out what works for you and what doesn't work for you.
To flip the pile of rope at your next transition, but you need a nice ledge that's not going to get knocked off. Once I pull up all the slack and my partner's let me know that that's him by yelling, "That's me," I'm going to put him on belay on the anchor. These are the 3 ways that you can belay top down. So the best and most preferred way is using a ATC guide or Petzl reverso. These are designed for top down belaying, and the nice thing about this is it's actually a hands-free device. So first things first is identify the extra hole that is created on these particular devices. That's different than a normal ATC or belay plate device. So we have the 2 holes where the ropes go, and this other hole at the top is where we're going to actually hang the device onto the anchor. So I'm going to take a locking carabiner through that hole and clip it into my focal point of the anchor.
Okay, so you have the option of clipping into the focal point of the anchor. You also have the option of, where is it? I'm trying to see where if we can see it. Well, let's carry on. Anyhow, this top-down belay method is the method that I use, like I said, 96.98014% of the time. So I mean practically all of the time. The only disadvantage, guys, is that if that rope gets weighted, you have to be able, because once that rope gets loaded and it maintains a constant load, you're going to have to be able, you can't open up that device again. You can't just instantly go into a lower. So you have to have a method of breaking the tension on the belay device and then changing the device into a lower. And that's not exactly straightforward as you think. So I would suggest, if you're going to use this, and I suggest you do use this, go to your local climbing gym and practice changing this over from a weighted device to a lower. And there's lots of videos out there that'll show you how to do this. It's more than we're going to cover today.
Next, I'm going to take my rope and pass it through the belay device just as it described. So putting a bite through one of the eyes, again, making sure that the climber side is on the top and the brake strand is on the bottom, just like normal belaying. And I'm going to clip another locking carabiner through the rope and the cable.
Okay, these Petzl reversos, I don't know how I got so many of those freaking things, but they actually do work really well on these devices, especially if you're using the smaller devices for thinner ropes. The thing is they're so well rounded that the rope kind of slides over top of them, as opposed to get carabiners like this and this, which have square edges, and they tend to not slide so well, and you can actually start pushing the kinks and stuff down into the bottom of your rope. So by the time the climber gets to, within 30 feet of you, he's got like a big pile of pigtails at his harness, and you'll literally have to clip them in and then work those pigtails out of the rope if you're going to do the next pitch. That doesn't happen all the time, depends on how new the rope is, but the newer the rope, the more likely that is to happen.
Lock it. And now, pull up, the rope pulls nicely, and if the climber were to fall, the rope actually pinches on itself and breaks. The next method is the munter hitch. So a really, really useful not friction hitch to know.
Okay, the munter hitch is a must know. So here's the thing, if you can't do a clove hitch and you can't do a munter hitch, don't leave the climbing gym, or don't leave the sport crag. Don't go into the mountains, is what I'm saying. The munter hitch also has the problem of, it also pushes the You know, it's inside your rope. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but there's like 20 little ropes or 10 or 15 little ropes, tiny little cords. And those tiny little cords aren't built in a straight line. They're built in an S or a Z shape. And that's where your rope gets its elongation, right? But also, you start pushing on a real tight hitch or through a belay device, and those Z's and S's kind of get pushed and pushed further down into the rope till it tends to let your rope starts pigtailing. And that's what it looks like curly little pigtails. And a munter hitch will do that. So it's not my suggested go-to. Where I use a munter hitch is kind of like short little problems in the alpine and things like that, where I may not be carrying a belay device, or somebody's going to jump across, anchor myself, they're going to jump across a small crevasse, give them a bunch of slack, but I have a munter hitch. Another thing about a munter hitch is that you can play out the some of the whatever the force, right? You can let it slip through your hand so it doesn't hit it directly. These other belay devices tend to be really hard to do that. They tend to either lock off or they flow, right? But the munter hitch, yeah, it's a must know. Number of times I've used a munter hitch on this configuration for this kind of thing on a multi-pitch climb. Probably count them on one time in my hands. Number of times, maybe if I dropped the belay device, or I had to make a choice between dropping my weed pipe and my belay device. Well, what am I going to do? Anyhow, so yeah, let's go.
You were multi-pitch rappelling.
Out to the local, what do you guys call that? Soccer, football. Out to the football pitch and drag it around the goalposts a couple of times, and I'll take all the kinks out of your rope. Make sure it's a dry day on grass, and that'll take care of that. So yeah, lowering somebody off of that, I would use a monster munter or a double munter, as opposed to just using a single munter if it's specifically for doing a lower, especially if it's a long length. It adds so much more friction. It's worth learning the monster munter if you are going to be in a rescue scenario. And before we go too far, let's answer a question. Oh yeah, Mark learned how to do the one-handed munters and cloves on this channel. Would this be a fair critique? Well, presumably he threw a piece of probe below his current stance. Why ghost yourself? Unclipping from the draw before you clove into your belay point? I think I would clip in. Yeah, I think it depends on the stance and what you're doing. Sometimes I won't. If the stance is big enough and I'm feeling good, I'll probably just build the anchor and clip right into it directly and maybe not protect myself. I think it's probably a good rule of thumb is to throw in a piece of protection, clip that piece of protection, and then build your anchor just in case, whatever, from rockfall, you pass out from all the adrenaline. The master point. Yeah, there you go. This is known as the master point here. This is known as a shelf, I believe. And there's legitimate uses for the shelf. And I quite often use it. I separate my belay from the master point. And I just clip people into here. My belay device is between this cord and this cord, not in between the two of them. So you got to be careful how you hook that up. But let's go on. This guy does an excellent job here.
The next thing I'm going to show you is the direct belay. It's something that's not as commonly used. It's a lot more cumbersome to use, and it's also incorporating yourself into the belay system. So if they do fall, you're incorporated into it, and it's going to be a lot harder to do a rescue. So again, take your locking carabiner. This time you can either go into the focal point, the shelf, somewhere that as long as it's never on one independent piece. So you have to be using it on focal point or the shelf. The reason we're using the shelf in this case is to get that redirect further away from me so I have more opportunity to belay. So
You know, and that's the thing, is you get that redirect, you want a lot of room. He could have also placed this up into one of the bolts or one of the cams that are up there. But like he said, you don't want it into one piece of pro. So if they were bolts, I would go with bolts. I would probably clip one piece of pro. As this is a anchor built out of gear, and he's directly right. Yeah, you want to go into an equalized point.
Here into the shelf, lock it. Take the free strand, and it's going to clip into my belay device on my belay loop. Set up my belay, and as you can see here, I've basically created a mini little top rope system. So I can belay my partner up as per normal, and if he were to fall, it falls onto the anchor, and I can hold him just like this, like a mini top rope.
So that's actually pretty good. Is there any drawbacks? Frank the Yank says, is there any drawbacks to using a Grigri when bringing up second on a single rope? Absolutely not. The only drawback for Grigris are their weight, I would think, because they are heavy. And then if you are on a multi-pitch climb and it's a long climb and you're carrying a ton of gear, you have to ask yourself, well, do I need to add a Grigri into this? Because you're probably already going to be carrying at least one belay device, which would be Reverso or the Guides thing by Black Diamond. And then you also have, pear-shaped carabiners. So using a Munter hitch. A Munter hitch is never a go-to, right? Unless that's what you're going to, unless you're using it. And I find them more useful in the Alpine, like I said earlier, Munter hitches. And are they Munter hitches? Because Munter actually didn't invent that hitch. And the Italians took claim to it. But the Italians claim a lot of shit. So that actual Munter hitch was used by sailors thousands of years before anybody used it for climbing. How do guys wrap double ropes on Grigri? I swear I've seen footage of people doing it, but I can't figure out how they'll do it without simul wrapping. You know what, Mark? Vincent, that is way off topic for this. Like, that's almost like we can talk about rappelling on another day and all those idiosyncrasies. Let's just stick with the multi-pitch shit for today. Okay, Chris Lawrence. Now, this is a ACMG IFMGA mountain guide. I know Chris from, I don't know really well, but we were kind of doing guides courses way back, 25 years ago or something, and used to run across each other. I think Chris was out on the Vancouver Island teaching there for like 10 or 15 years for one of the outdoor programs. Yeah, okay, so Chris does a job of multi-pitch belay station management. And I looked at this and I kind of agree. I'm not just picking on these Canadian ones, but these are the guys that I'm running across, and they also seem to be like some of the best videos out there, like the cleanest videos as far as presentation goes. So I'm going to stick with this for a bit. Let's see what, how long is this, Chris, buddy? Is this only 4 minutes? Have a look at how Chris manages a multi-pitch station. Chris Lawrence. God, you've aged, buddy, but you're still looking good. You're aging better than I am. We're the same age.
I'm here to talk about multi-pitch station management. Hopefully you can learn a couple of tips and save you some time on a big, long multi-pitch climb. I've worked out the numbers, and if you spend 10 minutes at each anchor on an 18-pitch route, that works out to 3 hours if you do the math. That's not doing any climbing. That's just time spent at the anchor. So I'm just going to show you what I do here. So as I'm approaching this anchor, I'm thinking, am I going to go left or am I going to go right? If I'm going to go left, I put a quick draw on the left bolt and I clip in. So now I'm secure and safe at this anchor. That's very important. I can slip, I can relax, and I'm not going to go anywhere. I put a non-locker gate down and out on one side of the anchor. Now I'm going to use my 120 centimeter sewn sling. That's my standard length sling. That goes on that quick draw, and get the webbing join up top. Flip in the other side, so the sling is now equalized. And here I'm going to put in either an overhand or a figure 8 on a bite. So an overhand up.
Let's go back a second here, guys. So I don't normally do what Chris does here. I don't know that it's wrong.
On that quick draw, and get the
So I don't put this sling into a quick draw here. I can see the reason why he's doing that though. And I kind of normally I'd just put a carabiner in there, or I'd put another carabiner, but I wouldn't incorporate my sling into one of my quick draws like this, but I would add another carabiner. This would work if you short a gear or something like that. Let's go back to where we were.
And here I'm going to put in either an overhand or a figure 8 on a bite. So an overhand on a bite or figure 8 on a bite, doesn't really matter which. Tie that off. Now,
so, like I say, when you start on these multi-pitch climbs, I would highly suggest you have bolted stations. This will be the configuration of the stations that will be the most common to you. And I highly suggest you learn how to do this equalization method. I find it the quickest, the cleanest, and it only takes up one sling, gives you good distribution. Here we have, because the bolts shouldn't be too far apart, this vector angle isn't very large. You have a identifiable focal point. This is where his hand is, and that anybody that comes up to it can easily identify where that focal point is. Quite often, if I see some convoluted thing where people are building anchors out of stations or out of ropes and things like that, the ropes they're tied into, the focal point aren't identifiable easily, and people can just end up clipping any old place. And this is not something you want to have. You want to get into a good, clean system.
Now I've created a nice master attachment point. I clip and flip my carabiner, take the rope in here, and this is where I'm going to put in a clove hitch, and you grab the carabiner to stabilize it, do a one-handed clove hitch, drop that in there, and now I'm secure. I like to be an arm's length away from my master point. I'm ready now to pull up all the slack rope because we've got a nice ledge here. I'm just going to stack the rope at my feet. But what this gives me is a nice anatomical working position. I'm not reaching down, hauling rope. I'm just pulling it straight towards me, redirected through this.
So what he's doing here, I mean, that totally justifies the way that he's doing it. This is his particular system. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with this, you know, because it's not nylon on nylon flicking back and forth with weight on it and things like that. I know there's going to be some guys going out there, yeah, this nylon's touching this nylon here, but that's a non-issue, all right?
This quick draw, which I will eventually use as my first piece of lead protection on the next pitch. Okay, so that's my partner that said that's me. I'm going to hook my partner now up to the anchor. Now I've got a couple of different options here for hooking this up. I can hook it up off the webbing or off my my personal rocker there. I like to use that in most situations because it separates the clove hitch away from the Black Diamond Guide ATC, so there's less friction.
This isn't something I would normally do myself, and my reasoning being is that if anything happens, then this is loaded onto my master carabiner, and so it's an extra step for me to unload this rope and move this onto to the master point or up to the shelf here. So I don't actually, I've never done this particular move right in here. That's his personal preference, not mine. So I just thought I'd point that out, that I would put my belay device separate. And I don't recall ever having an issue with my, and I'll tell you what, a whole bunch of the times I don't actually put the belay device into the master point. I incorporate it into the shelf so that I separate my master point from where I'm belaying, so that if I have a second person here or a third person, because it's quite common when I'm guiding to have two people on the end of the rope, might as well maximize that cash. Hey guys, get that money out there. Then yeah, so I would move it up into the shelf, above this knot, into what they call the shelf. So through each strand of these, not through just one strand in the middle.
So I'm going to put this in here, like this, clip that up, and I do a little systems check. I call it a housekeeping check. Locked, 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 and I check this to make sure I've threaded it the right way, which I have, and now I yell down to my partner that they're on belay, and they yell back up climbing, and I can start belaying them up. And again, this is very anatomical working position. I've got the perfect amount of throw for my arm. Come on in here. Okay, now my partner is going in right next to me here on this master point, clip and flip. Another clove hitch, and they're secured on the anchor. Lock it up. And what really works nicely for this, if Sophie's going to lead the next pitch, this could come straight to my harness. Sophie's now on belay, and
You could do that from anywhere though, right? It doesn't have to be on his master carabiner. And like I say, I would prefer not to have it on my master carabiner. Generally speaking, that flipping of the belay is not that critical, because who's going to take the lead next should be clipped into the anchor. You just have to make sure they're clipped into the anchor. Redundancy is always fine, but in the case of when you're flipping over, quite often we're at that belay for a while, switching gear and stuff like that. Before you start doing any of that sort of stuff, just really make sure that your partner is clipped into that anchor.
And I just take her right off there, and she just leads the next pitch. So that's multi-pitch station management. If you'd like a bit more specific tutorials on the individual components, follow the links, and we'll get you sorted out. Bye for now.
See you, Lawrence, buddy. What's all this guy's doing now?
So I've climbed my pitch. I've got to the top of the pitch where I'm going to make a belay. I've got a good belay stance, something I'm comfortable.
Okay, we watched this. Multi-pitch climbing, rope management and multi-pitch. This guy here, this is an American. He's doing his Alpine Guides exams. He's a full rock guide, which generally means that they are. This is what I wanted to look at. So you look at this anchor configuration, and I'm not sure. I think he calls it something. And they have a name for it. These guides, and I'll bring the book out or something later. Not today, but sent me a book on advanced climbing techniques and guiding techniques from two Americans, and it's freaking really well done. I'll give them a shout out. We'll actually cover that book at some point, and I might start doing some tutorials out of it, because you guys are asking for more advanced stuff all the time, and you kind of run out of whatever counterbalance belays and things like that. But actually, how to escape those belay devices once they're loaded and things like that are probably worthwhile, and it's filled with tons of good information on that. The book does not go, is not for beginners. Is not for, absolutely not. It's very advanced stuff in rope work, and they don't even play around with any of the beginning crap at all. So, worthwhile. But this anchor system here gives you actually, it's almost like, you know, the equalization with the climbing X, but the problem with the climbing X is on it's on one piece of cord. Any failure in any of these cords, these, you know, with the climbing X sort of thing, and you got a complete failure of the system, which is not good. These guys have seemed to have solved that, but a little bit of the problem is your bolts have to be like this, fairly close together, depending on the length of the cord that you're using. If you're using prusik cords, which generally are 5 or 6 meters in length, which gives you, once you loop them, they're 3 meters, which is 9 feet, which is more than enough. Actually would work really well. So I'd like to look into some of that a little later. I was more interested in this guy's anchor system that he's using. And then you can also actually separate your belay and separate where you're clipping in, or where you're clipping people in. And you can be actually quite identifiable because each one of them are dedicated to a different thing. In this case, this is his cameraman that's clipped in. That's not, it wouldn't normally be there, but he would just put his belay into the second strand here. And then that means relatively equalized.
And on this, now I went ahead and preloaded my ATC onto the anchor here. I do have this extra strand right here, which is for my cameraman, so they don't fall off the cliff. So you just gotta imagine that that's not there. All right, so first things really with rope management is you gotta look at your options. Here at this stance, we have a couple of options. One is I have this big platform right here. So now that I'm off belay and I'm starting to pull up the rope, I can literally just pull up the rope and pile it right at my feet right here. It is worth the time to sort of make a nice stack, so that way I could end up pancake flipping this for if I were leading off on the next pitch. Okay, so my partner just said that's me on the rope, and this is all my extra pile, so I go up, load them into my belay device as I would. I can say on belay and they're good to climb up. Okay, so now my imaginary partner, and so I gotta deal with that.
So there's this pancake
Help
stack.
my partner give a good belay. And so this is what we,
So I know that looks like just a big ass pile of rope, but grabbing it and flipping it over as he does it works most of the time. You really got to be careful though, eh? Because you know what I do, Joe? I tell you what, 8 out of 10 times I end up just restacking the rope by hand. And I might only restack 2/3 of the rope, and then the rest of it will come out nicely. But pulling out from the bottom of a pile like that is kind of asking for trouble. So here's what dude does.
called a pancake flip. You like to find the handle of the spatula, you sort of bundle up the rope and flip it just like that. Now, the thinner the rope and the tighter the pile, the easier it is to get that pancake stack good, but overall it just takes practice. If you're climbing with 2 ropes, like twin ropes or 2 single ropes, pretty much impossible to get a good pancake flip. So at that point, you'd be better off just restacking the ropes. There are a number of times where I would choose to just reflake the rope with my end on top too.
And that's generally what I'll do. Let's answer. I got a couple more questions here now. Yeah, Evan Barnes. Interesting point. I guess switching between devices is enough for that not to happen. I'll pay attention to that though. We'll still see Mike back in action lately. Your videos really helped me well when you're multi-pitch. Oh yeah, the accolades. Bring it, man. Bring it. I can use that shit. Interesting point. It's set up, mentioned rock climbing anchors book by John Long. You know what? I remember that book, and I think I had it, and I think I didn't read it because I thought I fucking knew it all. Looks like a sliding X with limiter knots. Yeah, I like that, actually. That's what it is, except they're on double strands. That anchor, you know, that dude here is using, that's on the screen right now, that's what it looks like, yeah. Except that I like the fact that they're on double strands. I'm freaking chicken shit, man, because I know anything made by humans can fuck up, right? If it was made on a Friday night or a Monday morning, then it's probably, you know, there's a 10% chance that it's worse than it was made between Tuesday and Thursday. What's my favorite? The bunny ears? Never fucking use it, man. Never. Can't think of any place that I use that. Quads are bomb for top roping too. Don't know, define what a quad is, Mark. Fish tank. Again, it's an anchor using the rope, but it kind of sort of more versatile. I think Honnold uses the bunny ears sometimes. You got to remember Honnold's out of the climbing gym, and he's also Vegas and Yosemite. So they have their own style down there, and I bet he also uses a double munter hitch. Or no, a double, not a munter, not a clove, belay, or bowline. Bet he uses a double bowline to tie in. Of course, he probably climbs and takes a lot of air, so. Got to subscribe to that guy. What was his name again? Chillin' Per, I don't know. It's called an equalette. The double version is called a quad. Quad. Jason H. solved the problems. You get 10 Mike Barter points. Mike Barter bucks. You know what you can buy with that? Well, if you got $2.50 and some Mike Barter bucks, you can buy yourself a coffee. Quad is a double equalette meaning. You mean the guy you were watching? You betcha. This guy right here is the guy that built the anchor that we were talking about. He also just did the pancake flip, which is fine with a single rope, but can't be done with a double. In a lot of cases, I won't even bother. I'll just take, if I'm not in a super big hurry, which most of the time I'm not, then I'll just take the time and I'll be talking to if I'm leading all the time, say I'm guiding, right? And in a lot of cases, if you're like me when you started climbing, you go out and you take any dipshit you can get off. We didn't have the internet back there. Anybody, anywhere, whether they know how to belay or not, you take 10 minutes to teach them belay, and then you start climbing whatever the fuck you want. And so in those cases, quite often I'll be at the belay and I'll be conversing, and I've got the time to restack my rope rather than just doing the pancake flip or anything like that. Yeah, Evan Barnes, if you look at his thing, he ties his quads on a 7mm cord. I used to use 7mm because that's the industry standard, but I found that 6mm to be just as strong in almost every case that I would use it. Except I had an extra meter. So instead of having 5 meters of 7mm, I had 6 meters of 6mm cord, and I find that much more useful. I've never heard of pancake flip work. Yeah, you know what, Mark, I'm with you on that, right? To be honest, I don't do it very often. The way this guy did it, it kind of looks like it would work, but why do you use belay gloves? Maybe it's cold. I don't think it's cold. He doesn't seem to be wearing a ton of clothes. But let's escape out of this guy's house. And multi-pitch climbing.
All right, multi-pitch station management here with Chris Lawrence Guiding. We're going to show you how to transition from a hanging belay with the rope coiled on the foot to a lead climb. So we're both clove hitched in to our anchor. I'm going to set up.
So you can see here, Chris doesn't have a ledge that he can work with, and he chose, I don't recall doing this myself, because most people would normally lap coil over top of the rope that's running to the anchor. Here again, he's used the equalized from the bolts to a master point, isolated by this particular knot here. And it looks like he's also incorporated that quick draw. This might be the same anchor. He's probably doing the same shoot on the same day. I'm using Lawrence just because I know him. I know he's a fairly safe guy. And he also does camera stuff. So
On my right side, because the rope's on my right foot and my lead climber's going left, I've got my belay loop pulled through onto the right side, which is super important. I don't want it stuck on the left side. So I get set up here. This is nice and efficient with the rope going right from the belay device to that
Frank.
side. What people often do is they end up with their loop
keep your eyes on the rope
side
work there,
like
Frank.
that.
This
And
mainly this area here.
so you just poke it through and pull it over like that, and then that's more effective for you. Okay. Now, before we take off the clove hitch for the leader, I'm going to clip some rope through to the high quick drawer on the anchor.
You know what? You guys get in the habit of doing this all the frickin' time, okay? Clipping off one of the bolts as you're leaving the anchor, or just step up, and even before you leave the anchor area, throw in a piece of gear, maybe a piece that you're not going to use if you got something that's looks like it'll take the worst piece of gear that you have, or the one that you seldom use. You know the one I'm talking about. But clip off that anchor, as a leader when you're on the multi-pitch climb before you leave the station, if at all possible, or otherwise as soon as you can, whether you're 1 meter up or take one step up, throw in a piece of gear, and then you can run the whole fucking thing out. I don't give a shit. But definitely get in the habit of doing what Chris is doing here and clipping in before the second who becomes the leader leaves the stance.
Which has been there since we...
This holds true for ice climbing, the Jesus nut. Yeah, there you go. All right, Jason. Yeah. Jason's in with us today.
Used it for our own safety at the beginning, and then pulling the rope through as a redirect when I was stacking. So the rope is now from my belay device through the quick draw, and my climber now can take the clove hitch out.
Yeah, I do the same thing, Frank.
So I'm belaying rope out to my lead climber, and the rope just comes off my foot. So it's nice and efficient. Doesn't tend to get so twisted as it comes off my foot. I've got this extra sort of 1.5 meters, whereas if the rope was coming off my shelf here, it's a bit trickier because in this part, I have to manage it a bit more. It often gets snagged up as I belay rope out from here. It just happens much more quickly, and if your climber's climbing fast, you don't have a lot of reaction time to pull rope out. I'm really having to work to get this rope off the stack on my shelf. So those are the techniques in summary for multi-pitch lead belaying.
I'm gonna cancel that. Don't need to see Riley's stuff again. Ryan Tilly. Aldo Parente. Speaking on sling master points versus carabiner master points, this clove hitch method seems efficient. It is very efficient, and we choose the clove hitch here in Canada, or I teach clove hitch, simply because of the ability to adjust the length as needed. So if I bring up one client, or I bring up, I've got a couple of people on the ropes and we're bringing up a couple of ropes, somebody wants to go over the edge and take a picture, I can just adjust the length without ever taking them off belay. They can take pictures of their friends coming up, and then once their friends getting close, I can bring them back in, take in the slack, and then have them within arm's length of the belay. The other thing is too, sometimes I want to be at a different length. Say the rope gets loaded for whatever reason, the person gets into an overhang, and then they fall off, and now they're hanging in midair, but they're so far down, I don't know what's going on down there, right? Generally, I do. I kind of keep a mental note of where they are and what kind of problems that they're going to have. So if I know the rope is loaded and not coming unloaded, I may want to have a look over the edge. But if I'm staying within my general rule of being 1 arm's length away from the anchor so that I can touch my master carabiner, then I can just tie off the rope, my belay rope, adjust the length, walk over, have a look, see what the problem is, come back in, readjust the length with that clove hitch. Whereas if I were tying, overhand knots and things like that, or bow lines on a coil or whatever it is, or overhand loops and things, then I got to retie and untie those loops, where it's just a much easier adjustment to deal with it. And then, I'd have to add another carabiner, so I unclip one, I unclip the other, whatever. Yeah, they don't need to be untied, and they just slide up the nose of the carabiner they're on. Yeah, so there's no. I think it's probably on multi-pitch climbs, the clove hitch is going to be one of your most useful go-to knots, and like I say, that's one of the sort of 5 knots you need to know to become a climber. I guess the other one would be the munter hitch, the friction hitch, the munter, or Italian, or whatever you want to call it. The Germans have a word for it too. I'm sure the Egyptians and the Romans had a word for it. So you need that. You need to tie into your rope with a retied figure 8, equalizing an anchor, so an overhand knot. And then there's some other one out there, I'm not sure what it is. Just learn an extra one just for the hell of it, like fisherman's or something. Yeah, but you know what? All of this stuff really, there's a lot of good points in these videos, even some of the ones that, I'm not particularly familiar with their systems.
All right.
Let's go back to the multi-pitch, see what we got. Maybe we pull out one more. Multi-pitch bolted anchor belay setups. This one's actually just long-winded and not that good. Belay transitions, multi-pitch stride, who does that? Tech climbing tips. I think, what the thing you could do to be safe, multi-pitch routes. Do your research, right? This isn't like 1985 or not even 1995 or 2005. There's generally a lot of information on the routes that you're going to do. Find out if there's any problems. Things like traverses. Traverses are an issue, right? They're hard to protect a second on a traverse if you don't have double ropes. And even then, sometimes those can be difficult depending on where your station ends up. So find out if you have those sort of problems. Stances, what kind of stances are you going to have? You're going to have to use, are they hanging stances or semi-hanging stances, like on an ice climb or something, which is quite common on steep ice climbs? Or are you going to have to coil the rope? And then if you are going to have to coil the rope, butterfly coil it, maybe practice that in your local climbing gym or on a crag and just see how that works for you. I'll talk about that in a second, Frank. The research, yeah, so you can't do enough research. And you know what? Some of my best fuck-ups are going back to places that maybe I did 10 years ago. And so I thought, oh, it'll be, whatever I did, whatever. Forbidden Corner is a classic example of a route on Yamnuska, whatever it is, 10 pitches or something. And where I went up the second time a decade later, and I got it mixed up with another route, and I couldn't remember any of it. And so I'm basically just like on-sighting this thing. And once in a while seeing a piece of gear or a pin or a stance that I remember, but most of it was just basically going where the rock was the firmest and hunting around with my eyesight looking for pitons and things like that. So do your research, and if you haven't, take a picture of the guidebook description. The next thing that I think people get a lot of problem with is communication, right? So since you're asking about learning to multi-pitch climb, quite often once you're 150 feet away from somebody on a windy day, or you get a bunch of overhangs, you set up your anchor, and then the person down below, if you guys haven't climbed together a whole ton, or if you just kind of hooked up, as you often do, you know, when I hook up with somebody in Spain to go do a multi-pitch, things like that, we have different systems of doing things. So if you look at the way these Brits climb, I wouldn't know what the fuck he's doing, right? Like I wouldn't, I'd come up to that anchor and I'd go, what the hell? And I'd be in a bit of a shock. Also, when you get up, like you're talking to your guy, you're on the ground, and you're going to climb up, and if you only climb together a couple of times, it's worth reiterating or discussing what you're going to do when you get to that anchor point, right? So you're on the pitch above. So you're going to say to him, you know what? I'm going to build the anchor or whatever. I'm going to put a piece of pro in. I'm going to yell down either I'm secure, or like the Americans do, off belay. I tend to only use the word belay once, and that's to put you on belay. And I inform people that. I'll yell down, I'm secure. That means I'm physically secure to the mountain. Doesn't mean I'm emotionally secure, and it definitely doesn't mean I'm financially secure, but it means that I am secure to the mountain in some way that he could take me off belay. That's my code word for off belay, is I'm secure. Also, the word I'm secure doesn't sound like on belay. From 150 feet away in a 30-mile-an-hour wind, the word belay may be the only thing that makes it, and the guy may think you're on belay. He's on belay and he's not. Whatever. Communication is definitely key, okay? So discuss what you're going to do when you get there. This is even important on single pitch climbs, you know, like on crags and stuff like that. If you're going to climb with somebody, you might often hear in Canada, 9 times out of 10, they'll double clip a couple of quick draws, clip the rope into it, opposing the bottom carabiners opposing, and they'll expect to get lowered off. Meanwhile, if I'm down in the States or something like that, they quite often will just thread through the anchor, or at the end of the day, thread through the anchor and then rappel off as to not wear out the ring on the anchor. I don't really worry about those big cold shut welded rings very often because they don't sit in one place. The only rings that actually wear out are the ones that are fixed and don't have the ability to move, and those are kind of like those hardware bought millions that are into a piece of chain, joining a piece of chain together. Over a period of time, those things will wear out, but they're easy to change, and so if you start to see any wear at all, just bring them. So Evan Barnes says, I just ran into that communication problem. I had to pull up a bunch of rope and set up a short rappel off my anchor to be able to yell over the ledge. Girlfriend wasn't stoked on that as my follower. Yes, exactly. So yeah, the communication thing, I cannot, enough, you guys. Talk to your partner. You know, set up a safe word. Never tie a rope around. Oh, no, I'm on the wrong subject again. We're talking about climbing. Yeah, okay. Talk to your partner. Let them know what you're going to do, what you're going to be saying, you know, when you're taking them on belay or off belay. what sort of delay. If it's windy or anything like that, what I will tell them what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up all the rope till it's good and tight. I want them to, communicate to me, let me know that's me, by yelling up and using your outside voice. A lot of you guys look at the ground and fucking go, yeah, that's me, all right? I can't hear that from 165 feet away, all right? Use your outside voice. So I let them know, and then I'm going to give it 3 really good tugs, and then I'm going to yell on belay when they're secure, right? And I generally wait till I put them on belay, and then I go 1, 2, 3, and then yell on belay. Yo. So communication. Communication is key. What are your thoughts on bringing up 2 seconders, 2 partners? Use double ropes, use a long line, and tie the second man in with an alpine butterfly? Alpine butterfly. Who does that anymore, Frank? Man, that thing went out. The reason the alpine butterflies was when they were using hemp ropes and they would break under tension. The alpine butterfly used to give it more strength. Any rope, you don't have to learn the alpine butterfly and overhand, whatever, bite in the middle of a rope will do just fine. It finds on vertical multis, there's often no chance of communicating. That's right, because you want to communicate before you leave the ground, okay? Little radios are good, and cell phones now. You could actually dial up your buddy. If there's any problem whatsoever, text them, right? So that you both know what's going on, or give them a phone call. You can do that these days. You couldn't use that. Those little micro radios, those are pretty good. They're good for all kinds of situations in climbing. I mean, they're an added piece of gear, and they can fuck up. So, dead or drop them or whatever reason. Still have a backup and communicate. Those little radios, I have a few of them with collar mics and stuff like that. I'll put them in my client's pack. The whole radio, I don't care. I don't need if they need to. I'll go through the usual process of on belay and all that, and then I'll get on my collar mic and say, okay, hey, Frank, you're on belay. Come on up whenever you're ready. And he can hear it in his pack. The radio's on the top of his pack. I don't need him talking to me, and that's been working pretty handy ever since. Yeah, walkie-talkies, we just talked about that. Bringing up 2 people, tying them into the middle of the rope, that doesn't really work too well. Although most sport climbs, multi-pitch sport climbs, are designed with a half rope in mind, right? So half of a 70-meter rope, 35-meter pitches are pretty common, but that doesn't leave you anything to play with, right? That doesn't leave you a lot of rope. So if somebody's designed half rope rappels at 70 meters, Brian Spears, for example, I have no idea why you did that on Takaka Falls. Why not just do it 30? And you can get by with a 50-meter rope. Why not just cut it into 25 meters? I don't know why you would force people to use a 70-meter rope on a climb that you get by with a 40-meter rope. I'm American and I hate off belay. I don't say that. I scream safe over and over and over and over until I feel better. This is from Mark Vincent. He's from the States. Yeah, I don't use the off belay myself because I'm just a chance of having a miscommunication, and I've seen examples of that happen. 1 watt walkie-talkies work well in my opinion, says Frank the Tank. Evan Barnes, ha 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 ha. I was going to say I'm doing that, just not at the crag. Yeah, especially with noobs, walkies are great. Yeah, and they are, but they can fail. So still get your basic shit together so that you're communicating in the old style. Go old school. Tugs on the rope with a voice, and that should limit the number of stuff, and communicating before you leave the ground. Bringing 2 people up on a rope at one time It'd have to be a pretty specific kind of climb. It would have to be very low end. Any place where anybody could pull one person off could easily pull a second person off. And that's the last thing you want dangling on the end of your rope is, 300 pounds on there, especially, so if it's on a low angle 5'5", 5'6" sort of climbing, it's got big jugs and holes, that works well. In the case where my daughter is climbing with her mom is down below her, so my wife will quite often tie into the end of the rope with quite a bit of slack, and this will be on an easier climb, and she'll just follow along below my daughter who's tied above her, and I'm end roping both of them, meaning I'm not tying them into the middle of the rope or one into the middle of the rope. They're both at the very end of the rope in one configuration or another. That way she can climb on. It's easily, it's well within her grade limit. She's not going to fall. I keep a tight rope on my daughter, Avon. Anybody know Avon? Put their hand up out there. And then Avon will just climb along and her mom will coach her, and I can bring them both up to the anchor and then just grab in the rope between them, and I can clove hitch them both in at the same time. And this works really well for us when I'm teaching somebody or I'm doing a multi-pitch climb, end roping with my daughter, and then having, somewhat less inexperienced climber is going to be closer to me. So basically I'm going to be belaying them, and the person who's the most experienced is going to be at the very end of the rope, where there tends to be a little bit more slack gathering and coming tight. So that's one way of managing it, but that's almost like a whole episode on itself, guys. Multi-pitch rappel, that's an episode on itself. Multi-pitch changeovers. Hey, this guy's got a multi-pitch changeover. Let's finish with his video on that. I haven't watched this. Okay, Evans, take off, buddy. Climb safe. Yeah, bringing up two people on two ropes is a bit of a work. I do that more on ice climbing than I do with, and I do that all the time, ice climbing, bringing two people at once. Just because they can easily keep them apart. And what I will do, I'll specifically design the pitch when I'm ice climbing to bring two people up at once by placing one ice screw over to one side, and then the next ice screw, I'm going to clip this rope, the second rope, and I'm going to put an ice screw way over to this side, and I clip that. And then as far as the climbers who are coming up, they're almost following two separate lines. And then I instruct them, give them clear instructions as to what's going on, and so that one doesn't get over top of the other. You can't do that with every pitch on every ice climb, but you can do it quite often. Things like the weeping wall and things like that. It's a real time saver. Where it isn't a time saver is when you got to start changing over quite often. I haven't, like I said, multi-pitch belay changeovers. If this guy's video is half as good as his last video, it'd probably be worth the watch. So let's do that.
Okay, so we're talking about how to change over on a multi-pitch. So there's two scenarios. One, where you're switching leads. So my partner here, he's going to come past me and he'll lead the next pitch. And the other scenario is that the leader is leading all of the pitches. So one person is leading every single pitch.
Don't freak out that he hasn't got his hands on the blade device. I do this all the time when you're using that particular device. It's well proven this works fine.
So the first scenario we'll talk about is the one person is leading every single pitch. So my second's climbed up. He can take his locking carabiner and clove pitch himself into the focal point of the anchor. Great, so he's secure. I can take him off belay. Now the next step is to take the whole pile of rope and actually flip it. So in this case, I've stacked it on the ground and it's a nice neat pile. I can just grab the whole pile, flip it 180 degrees. So now my rope is at the top and easy to pull apart. Now, my rope is on the top of the pile. He can put me on belay. Always put a redirectional in, so I'm going to clip the shell, or if it was bolt, I can clip the individual bolt. So I've got a redirect, I'm on belay, I'll take off my club hitch, and I'm ready to climb. Climbing! Climb on. The next scenario is we're swapping leads. So my second is climbing up and he is going to be leading the next pitch. So he's gotten up to the belay. He doesn't need to secure himself. I'm going to steal his belay device. Put him on belay. And now he can just simply redirect his rope. So he can redirect his rope. I've got him on belay. He can take my belay device.
So once again, you guys, this is a really good habit to get into that redirect before he leaves the or unclips himself or he leaves that station. Okay. Frank, hang into their freaking pancakes. Yeah, you know what? That thing was probably covered in maple syrup so his hands are sticky and it sticks to the rope and he saves on chalk. Think about that, Frank. So, yeah, this is really good. I actually haven't done this, but this is actually pretty cool where he takes this guy's belay device, puts him on belay, and then this guy grabs his belay device and puts it on his harness, and away they go. He did actually take the extra carabiner and put it on the guy, back onto the guy's harness, which leaves him with one less locking carabiner. Probably could have kept that. I can see on the back of his harness he's got a couple more, so it's no big deal, plus the one he's locked into. Yeah, that's a pretty efficient way to do things. The more efficient you can be on a multi-pitch climb, the better it is. It doesn't matter if you're on one of those simple little, one or two pitch, three pitch climbs or something like that. You probably got all day to do it. But on bigger climbs that are a dozen pitches or more, the time that you save on little things like that, or a minute here and a minute there, is the difference between spending the night out and sitting in the bar, getting tanked, looking at chicks, and having a good time, rather than huddled up with this guy here, all shivering and cold.
Climb on.
Yeah, that was worthwhile. So you guys, I don't know exactly how much further to go with this sort of thing. The other, the things that they don't talk about, which are probably the more really important things, is do your research on the climb. Pick things that are, if it's your first multi-pitch climbs and stuff like that, pick things that are well within your climbing ability. And I would suggest going to a bolted, sport multi-pitch climb with bolted anchors, and so that you can just work out the rope work and the communication and all that sort of thing. It'll be a lot more safer doing that. Of course, we didn't cover building anchors or anything like that. We're just talking about multi-pitch climbing per se. I already assume you know how to build anchors. And if you're going to go on and do a multi-pitch climb, then you fucking should know how to build an anchor, because that's definitely not the place to learn. Let's see. Building a quad anchor. I guess this is the quad thing, right?
This soap has done so much for me. Our skin is a critical part of how we function.
I don't know why I was putting so many chemicals on my skin.
Fuck, dude. And this video is no substitute. Use your
Hi everyone, welcome to Explore and Traverse. I'm Mike and I'm here to teach you how to do a quad anchor using just $10 worth of cord. Here I have 7mm cord and about 20 feet of it. You can do anywhere between 18 and 20 feet of cord to make your quad anchor.
Okay. Listen, America. You get your shit together and just go metric like everybody else. I think there's only 3 countries in the world that use the imperial system, right? And especially Americans, imperial, that suggests a king, right? And you guys are anti-king everything, right? Except for King Donald. So let's stop using the frickin' feet and inches. The other thing too here is I use the 6mm cord. It's plain strong enough, and I find it lighter, and I add an extra meter. And it's even adding an extra meter of cord. You know, 7mm, 5 meters of 7mm cord is the industry standard here in Canada. 6 meters of 6mm cord, 6 meters is the Joe standard, which is the one you should adhere to.
Sure, so let's start off. I take one end of the cord and I pass my finger through, making sure that all knots and bends and kinks are pushed out. Take both the ends of the cord, overlap them for about 20 inches. Grab the middle,
Inches.
take one end, passing it under one revolution, make an X, pass it over one more time, and then cross it through at that X. With the other end, do the same steps, except reverse that direction that you originally went. I'm going to go over.
Okay, you don't have to use a double fisherman's, and I don't use a double fisherman's. I use an overhand knot at the end of these things. I just make sure I have enough tail. Finally being taught by the freaking Backwards Guide Association here in Canada. And it took them long enough, like 25 years to figure it out. These things can get, once they're loaded and stuff, they can get really hard to untie. And you always have to untie and retie them all the time, which is a time-consuming thing on a big multi-pitch climb. So I don't use the double fisherman's. Most of the world does. Most of the world is wrong.
I'm going to cross it, and I'm going to pass it right through that X. Making sure that both knots are dressed well, have ample tail, in
Right.
this case, 3 inches, and when pulled tight, make 2 equal signs on one side.
Dress well and have
Effective
ample
on the
tail,
other.
I say.
Double up the cord. Very easy. Just take it, curve it, and then pull it tight so that you have 2 overlapping strands. Take one end, step on it, making sure it's tight. Pull that double fisherman's knot that you made up towards one end, but not in the way of this end here. You're going to grab below that and do what's called an overhand. Make a loop and pass it through. We have one arm of our quad anchor. Be sure to dress that knot. Take the other end, repeat that process. Being sure that when you make your second knot, it is roughly 12 inches from your previous. Make a loop, pass it through, and pull it tight. And we have ourselves a quad anchor. If you like this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications, and follow me on Instagram, Hike with Mike. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, dude, it would have helped if you'd clipped it into something and showed the advantage of the quad's anchors. Yeah, I wonder if they're going to start teaching that in Canada. I doubt it. If they didn't learn it from Europe, they probably won't teach it. Nobody has anything. It's got to be from Europe, guys. Otherwise, we don't here in Canada pay any attention to it. Actually, that's the Canadian Guides Association, as their masters are in France and Germany. What else is going on? Not too much. So I don't know. Let's just do a quick review, and then I can get the hell out of here. Rope management. clipping in, building the anchor, learning the clove hitch. You got to know how to do that. Top down belay using a belay device, either the Petzl or the Reverso. If you don't know how to use those things, if you are going to use those, which I suggest you do, is belaying directly off the anchor, not off your body, then you also have to learn how to break the tension on one of those things. You're getting an awful lot of retracted messages there, Frank. The tank. So yeah, I'll learn how to break, because that's happened to me a number of times where I ended up having to change into a lower, and it's not the easiest things to do, but you can be prepared. Make sure you have the gear on you that you need, whatever system that you're going to use to break the tension and take your Reverso and change it into a lower. Your Reverso or your Petzl things. Gree-grees on multi-pitch, I have no problem with those. Use them all the time. Well, I don't use them all the time, but I do have somebody who's a weaker belayer or much lighter than me. Say my daughter, for instance. I have her belay me using a gree-gree. She carries a standard belay device for rappelling, a Verso, or one of those standard stitch plate belay devices, but she also carries one of the newer model gree-grees. And so when she's belaying, she's definitely using a gree-gree, and then she also has the, for when we're rappelling, she can flip that over. If you guys wanted to learn more about rappelling with a gree-gree, how do you rappel with a single strand or something like that, all that kind of stuff, we could cover that. It's not that hard. But anytime you go out of things that are out of the normal, you definitely have to practice at your local climbing gym or your local crag in a controlled environment, right? So don't go doing any of these high-tech lowers and rescue raises and things like that without first giving it some practice. Okay. I don't know if this helped you guys or not. It kind of helped me a little bit reviewing it. It's easier now that there's more decent stuff that's out there to view. Back in the day when I started just putting stuff out, there was no other, I was the only guy out there, and so it was easy for people to find me. Now there's so much stuff out there, so many guides and so many people with film experience and things like that. Quad anchor brake test with 2 flex lines. Ooh, wouldn't that be something?
Introducing Speechalo, the most natural sounding text-to-speech software on the market. Hey,
Would you like to see us brake test some quad anchors with some 240 centimeter Dyneema slings? Check it out on this episode of Boltbuster / Slackstick.
Oh, busters! Learn highline climbing. Yeah!
I'm Ryan Jinks, and welcome to my backyard. Go to hownottohighline.com if you want to read the Bolting Bible or take our Highline courses. It's all free. It's all at hownottohighline.com. Today we're going to break some quad anchors because you guys have been requesting this for a while, and we've recently put out an episode with 6mm cordelette.
Alrighty, enough of that noise. Okay. How do you use a waist? Do you use a waist belay much? Oh, a body belay? Yeah, all the time, man. Not so much on whatever pure technical rock climbs, but sometimes if they're lower angles, you know how some rock climbs will go and then you get lower angle stuff. I don't use a mechanical belay device, something like a gree-gree or a stitch plate device, the Reverso or something like that, where the person is going to basically just, it's low end 5th class, so they're just going to be scrambling along. I can't keep up with those devices. And a body belay is freaking the most underutilized belay in climbing, period, right? So you can just throw it over top of your body as fast as you can go. It's quick, it's simple. You can throw it back down on the ground. It works, especially in the low angle terrain where people are moving really, really quickly. Because the problem in that terrain is that they're moving faster than you can belay. So if you're trying to go through a stitch plate of some kind and you're going like this and they're moving 3 times that, they'll build up slack whether they like it or not. They just keep on moving. And then if they were to trip or fall or something like that, they build up a couple of meters of slack. There's going to be an awful lot of force on your system. So a body belay, I find when things transition from being steep and then suddenly they're low angle for a couple of pitches and they're steep again, that I can just wrap my rope around a boulder. I don't even build a real anchor and throw a body belay in. Well, it is a real anchor, but it's just not what you traditionally call, the kind of anchors we've been talking about today. And then just throw that body belay, bring them up, and I can just take their end of the rope and just wrap it around a boulder a couple of times, just leave them there, and then just run up ahead and do the same thing over and over again. This is especially useful in the alpine when you're climbing on ridges and things like that. The body belay is an excellent technique to utilize, and quite often, depending on what kind of alpine terrain that I'm in, I may not even have a belay device. I'll just use a munter for the few things that I got to do that are a little bit more technical, right? So yeah, body belay, fucking best piece of gear out there. You learn it, use it. I have a full thing on the body belay somewhere in my repertoire of things, and quite good one too, I think. I like to think. Advanced climbing systems, efficient 3-piece anchors. Guys, I think we got lots of stuff. What are we going to cover tomorrow? How do you like LSD lowering method in guide mode? LSD. Well, I kind of stick to mushrooms now. LSD is not so much my thing, Kevin, but to each their own. LSD. Remind me of the LSD thing. That acronym is not catching me right at the moment. This bolt buster guy has found himself in a good old-fashioned bolting and chopping war. 420 for the win. Load strand direct. Not familiar with it, Jason. Don't know exactly what you mean by that. Load strand direct. And we're talking about lowering there, right? Where you defeat the loaded line. You defeat the loaded line. That sounds like I'm being heckled on stage. Heckled on stage. Okay, guys, I got to get out of here. What do you want to talk about tomorrow? I'll look it up. Somebody give me a clue. Anchors, rappelling, ice climbing. Me? You want to talk about me? Me, but enough about me. What do you think of me? I'm going to have to get out of here because this is getting kind of long and we've chatted quite a bit, and I'm going to look into this LSD load strand direct. Cleaning anchors. Okay. Scouting new locations. Scouting new locations. You know what I do when if I'm building a multi-pitch route? Because before you kind of have to you get up there, or you're coming down from the top down, bolting cleaning. So quite often I'll do most of the work from the top down these days. Used to do it way back in the day from the bottom up, but that tends to, I find more risky. There's so much rock over your head and things like that. But I use my drone. I've drowned my last drone. I haven't replaced it yet, but I had a couple of drones, and what I'd do is I'd send them up at certain elevations and far enough back that I could take like a nice high megapixel picture of it, come down a ways megapixel, and then take it into Photoshop, stitch it all together, blow it up, and I could see exactly to the handholds, you know, whether it was 5 or 6 pitches, I could have a good look at it. And then I'd know where I'm getting into and where I might be. It would save me probably a week. Single pitch cleaning anchors. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good one too, eh? Frank the Tank, single pitch cleaning anchors. Let's do that. Maybe I can get Avon to go out this afternoon and she can be my crash test dummy and she can run camera for me. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, drones are great that way. I'm not really officially allowed to fly them in the national park, and I don't if anybody were to ask me, but it's pretty hard to tell when you're way out in the backcountry all by yourself, and there happens to be an alien device from outer space climbing up the exact same route that you're plan on developing in the next couple of weeks. Selecting ice climbing areas for noobs, Frank the Tank. Okay, I'm going to pick a subject out of one of these suggested subjects, and then maybe I can make some sort of sense out of this. And so this dude here got in a bolting war, eh? Super good enough. Yeah, that's what it says on his hat. All right, let's sign off. We'll talk to you guys later. Ciao.